Good morning. My name is John Gjelkesen, President of the National Public Observatory. And recently I've been engaged in an effort to train other Star Party presenters to do green laser star tours of the night sky before the program. When we do telescope programs with the public at the National Public Observatory, we usually spend 15 or 20 minutes before the observing starts with a telescope acquainting the general public with the night sky using a green laser. And I've come to appreciate the fact that even though amateur astronomers may have years of experience observing, they may not necessarily have given it any the problem of bringing the night sky to the public any real focus. And so I wrote up a laser guided star tour content guide, which is right here, and I laminated it, and it's on both sides, maximize the space, and there's 15 points. And I got to thinking that maybe a YouTube video might even be more helpful. This is going to take 2 or 3 videos because I only have 15 minutes to do each shot. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I think you're going to need, and there are several books out there, but there's some really good ones. And this one's quite old, but it's 365 Starry Nights by Chet Ramo. And it takes you through every night of the year and talks about the night sky and different items of interest that are up at that time of the year. So I think that would be a good book to go through and read and study. In the first place, let me preface my remarks here by saying that there is no right way or wrong way to do sky tours. Anything you present to the public may be new to them. But my background is in 1982, I became the resident director of the North Texas State University Astronomical Observatory, and that was a teaching observatory. We had 900 students a year that went through the observatory for labs, and so we had organized material to present to the students both out at the telescope and in the classroom. And so I think that kind of gives me a different viewpoint on what you need to do when you try to bring the night sky to the public. It needs to be organized and it needs to have some focus, and it needs to be in general terms that shows the shapes of the constellations, the names of the brighter stars, and their relationship to one another. It needs to talk about how the Earth turns on its axis and how that makes the sky appear. It needs to talk about the ecliptic and how you find it's a plane of the solar system, how you can find the planets and the moon and the sun along there, and so forth. And the best kind of star maps, I think, to use for reference material would be ones that have some kind of outline. You can see here there's a little dipper, Ursa Minor, and they have outlined it. And so I think that's important. I've seen too many presenters. This, by the way, is the Cambridge Double Star Atlas, which is a really good reference material. I think using double stars in star parties is a really good idea, because it's definitely something people can see, unless they're really tight or hard to observe. But anyway, I've seen too many presenters just take the laser and like just circle the area in the sky where the constellation is. And I don't think that's a good idea at all. What you really need to do is you need to point at each of the individual stars and form an outline of the constellation. That's something that they can remember. So just a couple more real quick books here. This one's Map of the Heavens, which you probably would find hard to come by. Well, that's not one we want to use, and neither is this one. Grabbed some wrong books. Anyway, I'm going to pause here, and then we're going to focus on some maps. Okay, here we are. We're looking at a book called Night Watch, which I think is really good for this purpose. It's probably one of the best books you can get for a reference material for doing tours of the night sky. And the first area of the night sky you need to start out with is the Polaris and the North Polar Coordinate and the circumpolar constellations. So, and this is what I was talking about here. I apologize, I'm off camera. I'm going to have to be for this. I'm my own camera operator. So, but anyway, there you have Polaris right there. And the thing I'm saying about outlining the constellations is you would take your laser and go from star to star, and then you'd say, well, this is a box right here, and you'd point out this one. This is Kochab. It's the brightest second star in Ursa Minor, and then you would point out the fact that the North Polar Coordinate is less than a degree away from Polaris, so it's the most accurate guide to due north. And the way to find it is in Ursa Major, the Big Dipper, is a very bright constellation. So, and this is the simplified shape of it here, but this is a basic shape you need to start out with. It's basically a saucepan with a bent handle, and you can go down here. Here's Alcor and Mizar, and then you have the Dipper right here. And these two end stars on the Big Dipper we call the pointers, and they point right at the pole star. So as long as the Big Dipper's up, it's easy to find the Polaris. And the whole sky appears to rotate around this point, is what you tell your audience. And so these stars here, for example, in another hour's time will be lower, and this Dipper will rotate around this way. So everything's moving around the North Polar Coordinate counterclockwise. And this is the reason that the sun appears to rise and set, and this is the reason that the stars appear to rise and set. And same thing for the moon. So once you've gotten this out of the way, so people can find due north, and they have the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. Now there's a chain of stars, and we don't have the whole constellation here, but there's this chain of stars that running right in between the Dippers, and this is the tail of Draco, and it's running around, curving around towards the head. And there's another star in Draco, which is, I think it's really important to point out. And it's easy to find because the Little Dipper stars point right at it. These two stars right here, this one at the joint of the handle and Kochab, point right at Thuban. And Thuban was the pole star, according to this book, 4,500 years ago. So in the time of the Egyptians, that was the pole star. The whole sky rotated around this point, and the Earth's axis since that time has moved off this way. And this is a whole subject matter you can get into discussing with your audience, is about precession. And the way I explain it to people, it's just like a child's top. If you spin it up, and then when it begins to spin down, it'll start to wobble, and that wobble is called precession. And the Earth's axis precesses once, one precession every 25,800 years. So I'm going to pause it here, and we're going to change maps. Okay, here we go. This second map is just about the Big Dipper, Ursa Major. And as I showed you before, there's a simplified shape to the Dipper, but there's a more complicated shape that you can share with your audience. And it's kind of memorable because it turns the Big Dipper into a bear. And so again, you have the handle here and then the Dipper right here. But you can come out and you can pick up two more stars out here at the end. And so now you're making the body of the bear. Now it turns out on this map, they're not showing it, but there's a star out here that makes a point. And that, I always tell people, this is the head of the Dipper, or excuse me, the head of the bear, and that point is his nose, the tip of his nose. And so you have, from this point here, you have a couple stars down here, and then two stars here, which represent his front leg and his paw. And then there's two stars here, and it hooks over, and then there's two stars down here, represents his hind legs and his back paw. So what you've done is you fleshed this out. From first, you tell people that the best way to learn the sky is to learn the simple shapes first and then learn the more complicated shapes later. There's also a couple stars right down here. They're off the map, but they're just orientated like these two stars. And they look very similar. It may be these here, I'm not sure. Right here, these two. Well, I talk about that we call this the three leaps of the gazelle. And the reason for this is to point out the difference between a constellation and an asterism. Now, the Big Dipper, Ursa Major, is an official constellation, but this shape and these stars are really only a guide to the area of the sky. You can think of constellations like areas on a map, just like New Mexico is an area on the map of the Earth. And so these stars are just a guide to that area. So it's kind of handy, but there's no real official shape to some of these constellations. They were kind of codified in the 1930s. So, but an asterism, like the three leaps of the gazelle, is not an official constellation at all. But it's a nice memory trick for learning things about the night sky. I got to stop here. Well, quickly now, this is booties, and you come off the handle of the Dipper. The handle of the Dipper has an arc to it, and we have a saying, follow the arc to Arcturus. And so it comes down here this way, and you follow that arc and you land on Arcturus, which is the alpha star in booties. And I always tell people that booties is shaped like a kite. Or an ice cream cone, take your pick. And then right next to it is the constellation Corona Borealis right here. So this is this chain of stars. It looks like a letter C. And I explain to people that it's like a wreath like Caesar would have wore. So there you have it. You're teaching how to find constellations, and you're teaching how they are relative to one another and how to use one constellation to find another. So we've got to resume this another video.